So my three things here is Exponentials. I'm going to cover what is Exponential Technologies. We're going to cover enterprise IT right in the middle, and CIO innovation and leadership as a tail end. And I'm going to be doing this from a couple interesting. Has anybody here heard of Exponential Technologies before, just thematically? Okay, good. Obviously, you've read your book, Joe, yourself?
Part of it.
Part of it. Okay, good. So at least I know where we're starting from. So I'm going to start off with what are exponential technologies, for one. And anytime you hear these terms used, AI, machine learning and deep learning, robotics, biotechnology, bioinformatics, digital biology, virtual reality, augmented reality, energy and environmental systems, medicine and neuroscience, nanotechnology, blockchain, and networks and computing systems. So it covers a pretty wide swath. And you're going to see, I'm going to tie these together in a moment. There's only a few here that are going to be in your domain. So certainly networks and computing, and certainly within your area of concern with the community members that you service, you're going to have an area. But just exponentials overall covers a wide themes. And I'm not going to cover all these themes. I've made it thematic for medicine, the medicine area. But just know that when we talk exponentials, that's what we're talking about. I'm not going to kill you with this, but basically, what does exponentials have to do with medicine? Well, the way we talk about exponential technologies underpin a lot of the challenges we're having right now in a couple different areas: environment, food, energy, water, space, health, security, learning, governance, disaster relief, and prosperity. So there's these global challenges that are being solved with exponential technologies. And a lot of this is coming from Silicon Valley, and it's very, very disruptive. And as I go through this, I'm going to be explaining what this is. And part of it, what I want to do is make you aware of what is happening. So when you're reading the trade rags and such, you start to get where this is slotting in and start to build kind of a mental repertoire around this. So I just circled the areas that we're going to hit on today. Governance, security, kind of nice theme there. Health, learning, we're going to talk about that as well. The rest we're not going to pay attention to right now, but just know that space travel, energy and food systems and such. Like if I talk about the gut and microbiome, AGA is not here, but I know they're deeply interested in potentially the new organ that's probably going to be flagged as the new organ of the human body is the microbiome. So any research going on in the microbiome impacts food. So you'll find a lot of synergies across these areas that impact your domain. And one of the big things today is I want you to think in a brain that is offense and defense. And that's part of my conversation is I'm going to cover what exponentials are, but I'm going to show you, and then we're going to cover pure defense and some new ways to handle IT security that I know many of you are not covering, because I work with a lot with associations. Some may be, most not. I'm just going to cover different themes, and then we're going to end with offense and how to play offense and some different tools and resources that you can take and bring into your own organizations that Mark and I shared originally. And I think, Mark, you've had some success with some of the ideas that he learned previously. So I want to talk about United Therapeutics. It's a sort of a darling child, rapid growth company. Actually, not too rapid as far as growth, but Shola is the CIO for United Therapeutics. I've known him for about 16 years, and he's an immigrant from Nigeria. And he came here in the mid-'80s, kind of right at the cusp of the computing, like before computers were, they were still that, only nerds could use computers, and that. And then it really didn't become real until 95. So he was in it from the 85 to 95 realm. Came here, went to American University, and just hustled his buns off. Was delivering newspapers and going to school at American to get a degree. He already had an engineering degree coming here from Nigeria, but he wanted to get into computers, got a computer science degree, and then went into the workforce. And what happened is he went to work for United Therapeutics. The United Therapeutics has a very interesting founder. I'm going to mention Singularity University a couple times here, of which I'm the chapter ambassador for. The CEO for United Therapeutics came through Singularity University and pulled all the executives through there. And Shola was one of the ones that got dragged into that whole, to learn how to think about problems in a different way. So Shola, deep technical guy. Now that company has gone from 30 to 800. Just had a podcast interview with him yesterday. We're good friends, and I wanted to see where he's going. And so I said, tell me some stories. And I knew this story, but I wanted to hear it more deeply. They were up, they do lung, essentially think of a carburetor in your car and you bring it in to get it flushed and you get it all cleaned out. They basically do that for lungs. And so several years ago, Shola, the president, brought him in and said, listen, there's this company in Canada that can do this kind of carburetor flushing on human tissue, maybe 1 a month. That was about their capacity. And there's not a big patient pool, but it's hundreds of thousands of dollars to get this lung transplant. So the CEO said to Shola, can you turn this into something we can get like 10 or 15 or 20 a month out? Can you figure that out? And so Shola said, yes. Of course, he had no idea. And so his answer was yes. I think for many of us, it's that way as well. So what he did is he took his IT team. Again, he's in charge of networks, security, nothing to do with figuring these type of problems. I have no background, just comp sci, just general tech degree. But what he did is he took his team down and observed this facility and observed the interfaces between the machines, saw how they were flushing these lungs out, and worked with his team to figure out some technologies that hadn't been developed and interfaces to different machines and equipment in the lab. And they put a proof of concept together that worked. And I'm going to talk about this concept of testing, doing micro testing. So we did a testing routine. They proved the concept that they could get this done. They purchased that company, pulled the IP in-house, built a building, and now that is a major revenue generating unit for United Therapeutics and helping them scale northward. And I just mentioned this. This is an example I mentioned as playing offense. This is an example of him playing offense of something that hadn't been proven before, is how you pull off lung, they call it perfusion. And I don't know exactly what that is other than I think of radiators and cleaning them out. But now people can get transplants and they can pull them in. So this is an impact. Remember I talked about world impact? This is something that he can help people's lives. My father got a heart transplant last year. I know how difficult it is to get these organs. Now if they can have more efficiency and more rapidity to this, there's only 2,000 out of 200,000 per year get lung transplants. So there's a big waiting list. So this is a nice global impact area for him as a CIO and transformation leader within his organization. So I'm going to move on to defense. So let's talk about Sholan Defense. This is something that 2 months ago, I was having coffee with him and I said, we got to have you on the podcast to talk about this because this is really neat. So this is someone transforming their defensive operations help desk. I've had 2 CIOs over the past 3 months have lost their jobs because they've lost touch with help desk. And they've been shown the door because it's very difficult to do offense when you can't handle defense. And we all know this. And so obviously Shola was handling defense, or he probably wouldn't have been given the opportunity to do the offense. But this was really interesting. So he's got 850 users. And through the years, he's been rebranding his IT group into the business systems group. It's now, Shola's big into branding now and how people perceive his group. But it's not just about words. He's actually re-architected and re-engineered his group to called it the Nexus group. And it means some technical thing, Nexus. But the Nexus group they've rolled out what's called a proof of concept. Now it's fully being rolled out, is a Genius Bar. And what that is that he rolled out as a proof of concept in the lunchrooms of their cafeteria in Charlotte, North Carolina, and up here in Silver Spring. The techs came out of the dark, they came out of the back, out of the caves, and they went out into the lunchroom. And they brought robots, they brought drones, they brought the Macs, they brought games, and people started coming over to them wondering what's going on. And they said, hey, my kid's got a problem with the computer. I've got this issue, I got this issue, I've got this business problem. He goes, we are the geniuses, we're handling it for you. Well, it rippled through the whole company. Shola's been getting attaboys by the CEO, by the CFO, by the COO. The CFO now funded him to roll this out towards Charlotte and in his headquarters facility. Shola's so aggravated, as well as I am, so that's why we're changing it. In this local area, we want an innovation group for CIOs. He has to fly to Silicon Valley to really get good innovative ideas. Now he brought this over to them, and now Intel's doing this, and I forget the other company, I think CA, because they're part of his group, are now taking this concept of the Genius Bar. And you can do it many different ways, and everybody's culture is a little differently, but that's an example of kind of reinvigorating defense I look at in help desk and how you're the image of the organization. So as we talk about as we keep going through this, the concept of exponential and linear is very, very important because we're going to talk about Moore's law. So 30 linear steps, we can just say 1, 2, 3, up to 30. It's just 30 steps. If we took 30 exponential steps, we go 26 times around the Earth. And so some of the technologies that are underpinning all of this explosion that we're seeing in many different areas is because of Moore's law and reaching critical mass. And really the price power performance, which we've seen. When I show this to the CEO, they haven't ever seen this before, but everybody here has seen. This is the integrated circuit where it started as electromagnetic relays, vacuum tubes, transistors, all the way up till now. And this is what's transforming a lot of the AIs, because these have been around for years. I mean, a lot of these technologies have been around from the 80s and 90s and 2000s and have been through some pretty dark spots, but now the pricing and is becoming so good and the speed so good that we're able to keep evolving into what we started out in 1982 with a $2,500 Osborne. Now is in 2007 an iPhone that weighs 28 pounds, $500, but it's 150 times faster. And now we're disappearing into the cloud with computing resources. So there's a dematerialization that's going on and a shrinking that's going on as we get faster. So we have the underpinnings of the technology today in 1956 in 5 megabytes for 120 grand, now 128 for 99 in 2005, and then a 1,000x improvement for $99 for 128 gigabytes. So very interesting how we're getting more performance and we're shrinking. And one of the big pieces that I want to focus on, we have a lot of ground to cover today, but one of the big pieces of exponentials is the deception. It's basically, how many of you said, when these really smartphones came out in 2007, said that we were going to be doing business, you'd be transacting business on this. I mean, all the marketing, a lot of the early people were saying we'd do business on the phone. I said, no way, because I was using and we all said that, a lot of us did at least. When texting first came out, I said, no way. When Facebook came out, how many of you said, no way am I going to put something on Facebook? I'm going to put I was absolutely. Now, so there's a deception phase to a lot of these technologies, and boom, they're here. And what's happening is that we're not just dealing with Facebook disruption now, we're talking about some significant business disruption that I'll get to. And as we go here, one of the big things is the self-awareness within your organizations is to pay attention where your domain, your specific domain, American Academy of Ophthalmology, where those practitioners are, where your members are, and where you are in your organization in this curve. Are we in the ignoring phase, where we know it's there, but we're just ignoring, and then we're going to get hit? Or are we doing something proactive before it becomes chaotic and overwhelming to prep? And so those are some of the new thinking that's required as a CIOs that I'm spending a lot of time talking to, and the guys like Sholan and such are trying to build some awareness around these concepts. So the average lifespan of S&P 500 has decreased from 67 years to, in the 1920s, to 15 years today. And some of the ideas about the telephone has too many shortcomings to be taken seriously as a means of communication in 1876. And there's no reason anyone would want a computer at their home. So these are some pretty powerful statements to be made about some transformative technologies. So one of the concepts I want to have is when are we truly solid and stable, or do we have something we need to be aware of as far as disruption is concerned, and trying to pay attention to, like the Gutenberg press moment disrupted what? Access to knowledge and information, and it seriously pissed off the clerics. They were mad as hornets. And you look at the old text, they'll sit there and go, I can't believe that we're losing our jobs, okay? Losing our jobs. And we hear that same thing with robots and all these things right now. So it's a very interesting trend. The issue is, that was a Gutenberg press moment. Now we've got 13 of them going on concurrently at the same time, not one. And this transformed humanity. And one of the pieces to be aware of, those areas that are going to transform humanity, they're going to have a ripple within your members and within yourselves and your own careers. So many of us remember Kodak. I still was using my Kodak the other day to record my kids' soccer game. It's a little handout. It was beautiful. Problem is they're out of business now because they had all the patents, they had all the cool technologies, and they went from 28 billion to 100 million, and now they're somewhere around 12, 15, 30 people. I saw it last. And it was interesting. They had They had consultants. There's a consultant saying, I worked with them at this point. I made the recommendation. She showed the report online. She's so cool. She's a really interesting lady. And it said, you must innovate on the phone. You must take this IP and ignore. And that's hard. Legacy organizations is difficult. And we're talking about that because many of you come from what I would call legacy organizations. Do you disrupt the core? Like, they were so frenzied with all the options, they couldn't ever make a decision. And there's a way to innovate through those. And many of you come from organizations that are 100 years old. So how do you handle that? Because Kodak had a really difficult time managing that. And they were disrupted by Instagram. So impact that we've already seen. And we call it dematerializing because you can take, dematerializing means that software can put a brick and mortar business out of business, like instantly. And that's what happened with the bookstore, not Barnes & Nobles, but what the other one? Borders, yeah. So it's just iTunes, record stores, Google, research libraries. Not that they're going away, but we have a much different way to do it now. Amazon, bookstores, Craigslist, classifieds, Skype, long distance, democratized access and dematerialization. So this is what Exponential Technologies do, because obviously the underpinnings of these are things that we handle every day, IP addressing and speed and processor power, et cetera. So Hyatt is this is a couple-year-old slide now, and this is probably even more valuable, but Airbnb aggregates space. They aggregate unused space. That's their value. They own no assets, yet they're worth more than Hyatt. I guess I don't have an Uber slide here. Uber leverages unused space, disrupting the taxi cab industry. All it does is leverage space in someone's vehicle, and they don't have to own any assets. Difficult to compete with them. BlackBerry, where's our BlackBerries? Where's Nokia these days? You look at on the Exponential organizations, the story of Nokia I'm drawing a blank, but these are companies that dominated their space in Sweden or Finland, wherever it was. And what's going on with them now? They purchased by Microsoft. Microsoft gobbled up the IP. Tesla, so NADA, many of you know, some of you know Raphael. So called me coming in from a speech that Salim, who's the writer of the book Exponential Organization, he says, Bill, I need to learn about this because our automobile industry is going to be disrupted because Tesla's going direct. And they have 20 moving parts in their engine train, and Ford has 200. They're much more efficient. So who's going to start selling to whom? Tesla to Ford? What's going to happen to our dealers if Tesla's not going to go to dealers? So it's disruption happening there. Again, he's trying to be proactive because he services the dealers, NADA. So has it happened yet? No. But New Jersey's up in arms that Tesla wants to go direct. I mean, you can start to see this happening, and so we want to be ahead of it. Big piece here is that Exponentials need nobody's permission. And this is why in France was up in arms, and they were burning cars last summer because the technology is a downloaded app. It goes quicker than the ability to go through regulation. So it went right to people's phones, not through the legislative assembly in France. So it's disruptive that way because people start burning cars. It challenges everyone. Drones, I can guarantee the FAA did not want to talk about drones this summer. They had other things to talk about. But this was happening way too fast for them, so they had to deal. So it's a very important concept of permissionless, and that also happens with us from a security point of view. When I transition is how are we governing? How do we govern in a world that our data is flying out the doors? I mean, we see that happening with all of our data going into the cloud. So how do we govern in a world where it just happens many times behind our back? So this is an important thing. It's called permissionless innovation, and it's something to be aware of within your own memberships and within yourself personally. So a couple of resources that I'll leave here for you just to learn more information. I'll run to you afterwards, but I run the Singularity chapter for Singularity University, which is based out of Silicon Valley. I run the local chapter, just really bringing all the best people that are making things in these areas and solving problems, and I bring them to people that are wanting problems solved. And so there's a lot of good, but there's a lot of risk. And it's important to understand both the good, the bad, and the ugly with exponentials. And so that's my point. My pitch is not to pitch you this is so great. There's a lot of excitement to go on, but it's also to be aware so that we navigate and help our companies navigate through this. And there's some good reading here. Had this gentleman on my podcast, one of the top business innovators since the early 80s, Daniel Burrus. You can download his book. He also has a newsletter, Flash Foresight in Exponential Organizations, which I sent to Mark. And anybody here wants that, I'd be happy to send it to them. Just leave me your name afterwards.